All right. Well, Adam, thank you very much for joining me here today. Long time no see, I guess. We kind of met briefly in Austin. I think you had a
Yes,
longer conversation with my colleague Marat. Uh,
yes.
yeah. And so I wanted to reach out to you and just kind of pick your brain about, what's going on in your world and the whole thing of, AI and how that relate to heavy civil construction.
It it's really interesting. Um Let me kind of give you a background of where I got interested in it, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about how I see it driving value for civil but also commercial construction
Very
because
good. Yeah.
I'm very
Definitely
lucky
want
to
to hear
be
it.
in I'm very lucky to be in a company where we do both. And they both do things really differently. So it's interesting to think about and talk about the areas that we're exploring. Um, so I started back when I was in graduate school. I was in graduate school for political science of all things. And one of the areas that we obviously did was a lot of statistics. So I've always been kind of a number guy and a metrics guy. I really love it. I think it's interesting and fascinating. And in about 2018, I started really kind of delving into machine learning and how it might provide us with some opportunities in construction. But, again, these machine learning models uh, are very good at what they do, but they require a lot of data and they tend to produce the same results every time. And in that way, they're great for predictive modeling. And so, it excites me and it kind of interested me. We did a pilot of that in 2019 and shortly before COVID. I think the last conference I went to before COVID was on machine learning and using open source tools for it. And honestly, the volume of information that we had at our fingertips, even though we've been around for a very long time, more than 100 years as a company, isn't enough. So,
Yeah.
like which is kind of crazy to think. But is and which is why, you've seen some other folks emerge, and we can get back to that and have that conversation a little bit later. But I got really interested about a year ago in where we were going with generative AI because I think that it has some opportunities for us to deliver value in kind of different ways in the construction industry. And so my first foray into it felt a little bit like, oh well, we're kind of experimenting. It seems like it's okay. And then um, I read a book by Jeff Woods called AI leadership. And he said, okay, generative AI is actually a thought partner. It talks to you and gives you feedback from different perspectives. And, if you read his work, um, he's got some really great ideas about how to use it in that particular way. And so it kind of got me thinking, like, what are the different ways that we can use AI in construction industry? And so what we've done is we actually have different people kind of approaching it in different ways. And I've kind of narrowed down on four different areas where we can think about the value of AI in the construction industry. One is kind of uh, you know making simple tasks even easier. And this is sort of what we're most familiar with, I think, in the AI application space, where we're automating double entry. There are lots of different ways that that's important. In particular, we get fewer keystroke errors. We, automate things that tend to be very complicated. Um, you know, like, that first match between the purchase order, the invoice, and the bill of lading. So if we can get that first, because we all have to audit that in civil construction because it is such a big component of what we do, and also it represents a risk of fraud that we want to make sure that we're addressing. But also, it just makes those jobs a lot less tedious and gives our folks an opportunity to do more higher value work. And we certainly have the work to do. And if we can use that sort of automation process for relatively simple tasks, that's a real win, I think, for construction. The second is sort of really simplifying complex tasks. And this is where generative AI starts to build in. And let me give you a couple of examples of this that I think are really helpful. The first is we've been experimenting with a company who helps us with takeoff processes. So in the takeoff process, as we all know, it's very labor intensive. We have very wise people doing line drawing for many, many days. And
Mhm.
the there's a lot of value in being able to do not even just one takeoff faster, but do multiple takeoffs. And thinking about it from all of the different perspectives, you think about, okay, first of all, in pre-construction, the ability to then go in and do a takeoff more quickly means you have more time on bid day when you're rushing around trying to do 5,000 crazy things, talking to material suppliers, subcontractors, trying to get all of the information in, and you're able to have that takeoff right there. And then, additionally, as we go forward in the project, we always like, even a really big project, you really want to retake off after you've won the project to make sure that
Yeah.
your units are right, to make sure that you've got everything. Or if you have a major change order, that would be really terrific to be able to do that takeoff that much more quickly.
Yeah, and you
With
would
the
certainly want the
opportunity.
redundancy, the speed and the redundancy of it to do it. Because again, you run something like that twice, and it gives you two different answers. Then you know you've got something wrong, right?
And the other thing too, and this is something that I really am trying to talk about more in this regard, is it's important to think about how that also could benefit an owner. If we're doing underground work in preparation for a hotel, for example, um, pilings, underground utilities, those kinds of things. If we could conceivably say retake off what that would look like if we made a change that has a structural element to it, and would require us to move where we're driving pilings, we can say, okay, look, we could move it this way or we could move it this way. And if we move it this way, it's going to save you a week. If you move it this way, it's going to cost you an additional week. So we can actually net save you 2 weeks on the carrying cost of your construction loan if we decide to go this way. And you
Yeah,
start saying, okay, wow, that kind of ability to be quick is
yeah.
really exciting.
It's a nice idea for a service element that you could implement into your company, right? Where, hey, not only are we the people that can perform the work, but we can help guide you
Hmm.
as to where this thing can go with accuracy, right?
And like more and more and more, we're seeing the contracting vehicles in civil construction being design build of some form. And
Mm-hmm.
like we're getting less and less plans handed to us, which certainly has its benefits and drawbacks. We really love the idea that we can actually say, well, maybe that's not so constructible, but at the same time we also takes longer to get that first shovel into the ground.
Right. Well,
uh,
nobody really wants to be responsible for when you're the design build and you go, oh, what side? I don't know that that's constructible. We need to go back to the design team. Uh,
exactly,
but
that's
but there
us.
is,
Okay.
yeah, that's also troublesome. But yet there is the ability to have it in your wheelhouse. Gives you a bit more control there when you have
Yes.
design in house. I know the trend in the market. Everybody's kind of moving toward that design build just because I think folks just got tired of going to court or going to some sort of arbitration after the job was done. The liquidated damages clauses just finally started to pile up.
Well, it's the old saying that the last phase of construction is litigation, right? So,
Yes. The
um,
job's over when you're in litigation. Yeah, right.
exactly. It's done. Yay. Here come the lawyers. Uh, but then, other examples are some tools out there that are doing analyses of schedules. And I think that schedule analysis with AI is really starting to drive some real value. not only historically against your schedule, but against standards. I
Mhm.
think that there are well-established companies that have been doing that really well and using AI for quite some time, and they're really starting to pop up, I think, in greater number and in greater uh, um, with greater ability. So to
Yeah,
provide value.
I think there's some value to it. I feel like when you start to ride into the journey of CPM scheduling and those types of things, a lot of times, especially when it's, I'll say, human based, it's very, stick your kind of thumb in the air, see which way the wind is blowing some days, right? But if you have a proper analysis that has historical data behind it that says, in this time of year during this specific stint doing these specific tasks with said specific crews, I think that, and you may have heard me say, but I think that AI, as far as the analytic portion of it, has to become very local,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't, like I said, I think I talked about it a little bit in Austin about you can't have a crew in Austin and move them up to North Dakota and think that they're going to perform the exact same way that maybe a crew in North Dakota would then perform someplace else. It's very local, and the
Mm-hmm.
data has to be your own. Which you come to find out, sometimes you're very, very short on that amount of data, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that makes a really good point of the importance of thinking about AI not as a replacement for the humans, but really as kind of a way to assist us, kind of get us further forward. If we are starting right now at the starting line, maybe we can get up to the 20-yard line, maybe we can get up to the 40-yard line, and be closer to that goal and have the tools that'll help us. Because one of the things that we all talk about, we have kind of an advisory group that gets together every other week to talk about our AI strategy, and we all say, look, this is not going to replace us learning how to write a schedule really well. This is not going to replace superintendents from understanding how to build really well. We don't want to let, a 22-year-old just out of construction management start writing schedules with an AI. We want them to sit with somebody who's done it before, understand how to do it, and use some of the tools of the AI to get rid of some of those either simple tasks or relatively complicated tasks.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I really just had a conversation yesterday about something very, very similar, where you start talking about you don't need a replacement. What you need is a tool. You need a
Yep.
guide, right? I think we were talking about a layout machine. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a big fan of robots, but I like the
Mm-hmm.
idea of a layout machine. I'm going to go back, even when I was a superintendent or back in the field. I was checking my work twice anyway,
Yes.
right? And so even if I had a layout machine, I would still be checking it twice to make sure that it was there. But I have that part done, I think. And a lot of times, what ends up happening is people get in a hurry or they don't feel like they have enough time. They don't check it twice. And the old adage of measure twice, cut once comes
Yes.
into play. And I think folks were measuring once and then cutting once and then like, oops, oh, here we have it. We've got rework to do. You know, and
Exactly.
in that consideration, that's where most of your efforts come from. When it comes to spending extra money, spending extra time.
And it's exactly that. We had a project where we were doing some vertical construction on some residence halls at a university locally, and all of our internal walls were prefabricated steel studs because they had to be bearing. And so the embeds were really important. We had to know where they were and know where they were going to be. So we built a SOP with the laser scanner where we would shoot it 3 times. You shoot it before the pour, make sure that the embeds are where you think they should be, during the pour when we actually have a chance to fix it, and then after the pour. Because if we messed up on an embed, that's a huge, huge problem. That's, a day of work. Pull out the old other one, drill a new one. I mean, it completely takes you out of that flow. And one of the things that we really like to think about is how do we build a flow in that construction? How does it work smoothly, making sure that it flows.
Right. So that brings me kind of to my next kind of thing. I want to talk. We talk a little bit about CPM, schedule management, those types of
Hmm.
things. But you also there's the element of flow, which is kind of a lean principle
Yes.
when you start looking into it. And I'm finding more and more just with folks that I talk to, you kind of need both. You need to know that
Yes.
critical path. And there are some purists that are over on the lean side are like, "Oh, I don't even want to know about the critical path. It doesn't make a difference." For them, maybe it doesn't, but for some folks out there who are looking at the schedule a little bit differently, they may need it. So I think, and you tell me what you think, because I've had conversations about this. A lot of technology that's getting developed um, tends to lean towards the CPM method rather than a flow method, and kind of lean technology kind of thing.
I think that that's true. And so what we've done is we've kind of built some things to bridge that gap because
Mm-hmm.
we still, I mean, there's still a lot of value in look ahead for a pull plan. Like that, honestly, the even though we don't have sticky notes on walls anymore and they're virtual inside of a inside of an app, uh, that's still incredibly valuable for our subcontractors. And what's really cool about AI is we had a team member who figured out how to get that first cut at the weekly at the 2 week ahead pull plan coming out of the schedule. So he fed it into the AI and he pulls out the pull plans. So
Nice.
there's some marriage in there that I
Mm-hmm.
think is really valuable because I fundamentally think if for no other reason we have to have a CPM schedule, we still use P6. It's like a fundamental document in the contract, and
Yeah.
it drives us towards fulfilling the contract appropriately. And
Well, and I
then
think that comes
bridging
down
that
to
to the field and to the activity of the field, I think that the lean tools make all sorts of sense in that regard.
yeah, I think there are two sides to it. I mean, obviously, you've got a CPM side where people need to see that. There are some folks that
Right.
need to see that who are they're a stakeholder in the operation of some sort, right? And that's really all they want to see.
Yes.
Hey, where are we on this? Where we
Right.
got started,
Milestones and all that stuff. Yeah.
right? But if you're working as subcontractors and you're doing the pull plan and all that kind of stuff, figuring out what comes next and who's up and what you got to get ready to do, those types of things, well, then you need that kind of access to that information as well. And then the more
Hmm.
that we can utilize the technology to provide that sort of communication, and be connected in that way, that the better we are, right?
And so, that's where I think technology has got to help us because we need both. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the it's not an insubstantial amount of effort for us to do both. And if we can get some tools that help us bridge those two perspectives more effectively, then that's a good use of technology in the field, I think. Like
Yeah,
if we can enable those processes that we know work really well,
mhm.
um, in a more effective way, in a way that doesn't substantially eat at our margins, um, that we want to do that.
Right. So that leads me to kind of my next thing. We were talking about, obviously we want to use technology to help us communicate better, but then there are some moments when we don't really need it to be there.
Hmm.
There are some things we don't need it for. I don't need it to make phone calls for me if
Hmm.
I need to make a phone call, right? They're just things that require the human touch. They require the nuance of person to person, those types of things. I think some of that, some of that troubleshooting, problem solving. Some days you're just going to have to get everybody in the room uh, and say, "Hey, the 15,000 emails that we've sent amongst each other, or whatever we've tried to do, it's obviously not working, right?" And so we should have just made a phone call, got everybody together, and so I can see that with a 100-year-old company, you still got some of those folks around there, right?
Well, and I'm a big believer in that. We have some sort of they're not formal rules, but in a lot of parts of the organization that I work with, we say if we've gone back and forth more than twice, it's time to just get everybody in the room because we're wasting everybody's time. Let's just take 30 minutes and hash it out, and we will figure it out. And
Yeah.
that's really, I think, important is that we do need to remember that in a lot of ways, construction is a relationship kind of business, like where you know, we work in relationships constantly. The project management function is almost exclusively relationship driven. It's
Hmm.
relationships with subs, it's relationships with material providers. It's having a good relationship with your haul truckers. It's having a great relationship with the owner and the owner's rep. And, all of that I think is really a critical component of us doing really well. We need to balance this, the technology with the people stuff and hopefully use the technology to give us more time and space to do the people stuff. I kind of think about it like there's an art to and a science to building. And
Hmm.
what technology needs to do is help us with the science and stay out of the art and so that people can build really great things. Because in the end, like we all have opportunities to build things that are incredible. If it weren't such a great glare, you would see behind me the Superdome, and Bow Brothers drove the piles for that back in the 1960s. And
Right.
it's amazing to see that still standing today and just hosting the Super Bowl this last week. It's really exciting.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So I also noticed Louisiana, the state of Louisiana, is uh, just started. The news is they just started a launched Louisiana Innovation, a new division dedicated to making state leader, developing high growth technology enabled startup companies, first of its initiative in Louisiana. Basically, Louisiana is trying to say we want to be first in artificial intelligence kind of technology. What's your thoughts on that?
So it North Louisiana is actually in the sweet spot of the country for data centers.
Yeah.
It's far enough north that you don't have disruptions from hurricanes like we do in New Orleans, but far enough south that the weather tends to be pretty good most of the year. It's also right in the middle of the country, right in the traffic lanes, and right at the confluence of a lot of fiber. So there have been some activities for a very long time around getting Louisiana ready for participation more in AI and in the global economy in that way. And I think that we're welcoming it. It's something that I think can provide a lot of resources and a lot of really interesting opportunities, both from a construction perspective and building interesting things, and not just the data centers, but also the power to drive the data centers, but also the kinds of people that it's going to bring in and the perspectives that it's going to bring in some really smart, really incredible people. So I think we're all very excited by it. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for Louisiana to play in that market, and we're just going to see how it goes and how we build. I really feel like you know the the um, the Chinese uh, DeepSeek announcement a couple of weeks ago is really in some ways an opportunity for the United States. It's kind of another Sputnik moment. Like, this here China has said, "Oh yeah, we can do this a lot faster and cheaper than you Americans," which, you know, we certainly are slightly skeptical of their particulars. But it also is, if the United States wants to continue, we need to put resources in it. And I think that some people are really stepping up to do that. And I think that that's very exciting.
Yeah, there is a part of that that can provide a lot of education for
Hmm.
folks, right? You may not need all the best technology, but of course, I feel like a lot of times startups, uh, they love to raise money,
They
They
do.
love to talk about big ideas, and people love to throw big money at it. When you may not necessarily have to. So I agree with you in that. But I want to kind of talk to you about, it's going to take construction and
Hmm.
construction people, like Bow Brothers, like, all these other different folks out here that are they're building structures, building roads, building power plants, building data centers. It's going to take all those things to kind of support
Hmm.
any of these new initiatives, whether it be Stargate, whether it's Louisiana's, statewide mandate kind of thing. But then it leads to the question of like, have we lost track of kind of sustainability of are we going too far? I would say there's always an adjustment. There's a pendulum
Right.
swing, right? You feel like, well, we're kind of going to go this way. We need to really pay attention to all this stuff over here. And then all of a sudden there's this pendulum like, no, we really need to pay attention to this. And I literally just finished up a newsletter about this. Kind of my last point was we got to be very, very careful. We have to find a balance here. We can go too far with this, even from just if you're just looking at a sustainability point of view. If we're talking about things like, if we're talking about things like climate change, and I'm not saying I'm a believer or I'm not, but you know, the zeitgeist says, hey, we've got problems that we contribute to. But then the zeitgeist also says, but we need AI, and we need more power and we need
Hmm.
all these things. So I don't know, just two people talking about this kind of thing. What are your thoughts on something like that?
I do agree with you that oftentimes we tend to swing, you know, violently back and forth between one extreme and the other. And the reality in most cases is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
That there's certainly something to be said that we do have an impact on humans have an impact on climate, and also that AI has, in data centers more generally, consume more electricity than any one given country in the entire world. Uh, so, it certainly is something that we're going to have to approach carefully and think about and think about how we can do it, you know, how we can do it more efficiently. I mean, if we need AI, how can we train AI and run AI systems that doesn't require the kind of power requirements that we have today? What's going to be that kind of innovation to use these tools, and where do we not really need it? I mean, honestly, a Google search is fine for the web. I don't need it to do an AI summary for me. I just need it to return the websites that I need to find. And, you know, everybody at this point is trying to bring AI into their technology product. I call it AI washing, where you sort of like, oh, we're going to reskin ChatGPT and throw it in the sidebar, and then you can talk to ChatGPT, and I don't know what it does, but it's really great. Um, and part of that has to do with what you mentioned earlier, which is that, if you're looking for money from a venture capitalist and you don't have a slide on AI, you're not getting any money right now. So I think that there's something to be said for that. Um, I I really do feel like, you know, um, I, I think it's there are so many opportunities for us to think about how technology can help, but we don't need everything to be AI driven. We just don't.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
like I would much rather have a company honestly talk to me and say, look, we're not doing AI right now. It's not core to what we do. I don't think it's going to help. And if you can't demonstrate value, then we shouldn't be throwing it into our product just because we can.
Yeah.
Because you're just going to pass that cost on to me, and maybe I don't really need it.
Yeah. And I absolutely agree with that. I mean, there's been technology that's been developed in, you know, years past, in several different markets where you've got an overzealous software product. I Okay, it's got all kinds of bells and whistles, but most companies or whatever would only need it to do this. Some would even say that ERPs uh, were are in that vein
Oh,
where,
you are 100% right. In the 1990s, when
yeah,
everyone was doing an ERP, it was the thing. Everybody said, "Oh, we're going to save an incredible amount of money with
yeah.
this system where everything's together." And I have yet to see that materialize. And here we are 35 years later, and it still isn't there yet.
Right. And I guess that's the thing, if you only get 30% usage out of a product, and it's hard to measure soft cost. It is.
It is. That's true.
And so, maybe you find it in some of those soft costs and those kind of things. But again, it's kind of like that it's that pendulum shift, right? That pendulum shift said the same thing back in the 90s. They were developing ERPs, and you're going to have one solution, you got one place to go, you won't need anything else. And then, shift over here where you've got a stacked. Who was it? When we were in Austin, they were talking about, I don't know if you were in the room or not, but they were saying they had like some 72 different softwares in their tech stack. And I'm just like, I was
It's
flabbergasted.
crazy. And the
Crazy.
amount of time and effort that they're taking making sure that they can communicate effectively is an incredible drag on their organization. They're spending incredible amounts of money doing that.
Right. And incredible amounts of time trying to figure out how they're going to integrate just three of them,
Yeah.
right? Or just five of them, let alone 72 of those.
And it's so interesting because in so many ways, like that's something that I also think is really important that as we evaluate adding additional software, we need to think about how does it work with our primary platforms? I mean, there are basically two platforms today in construction. It's either an Autodesk or a Procore. I think Oracle would like to be mentioned in that, but I don't think that they're really in that. They're not competing at that level. But we really need to think like would it be better for us to just use a tool that's deeply integrated with an existing platform and works fine and maybe gets us 90% of the way, or something that's 100% that we're going to have to figure out how to, you know, jerry rig and throw the kitchen sink at it to make it work with the rest of our data. And the not all of us are in the size of organization where we have a huge data analytics team. Many of us are not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of value with keeping that data in a platform where if we can bring it all in there, we can do the analysis inside of there. We don't need to build a whole infrastructure around that either. Because in the end, if it's all the data are together, then our decision making can be driven out of one place rather than out of four, five, eight,
Yeah.
172.
No, I totally agree, man. The thing that I talk about with Austin Lane and AL Mobile is about, get your get your data right first, right? If you got your data right first and you know where it's at, and then you can kind of move a little bit easier. I've never been one that wanted to backtrack and go, well, what did we do, and how do I sort all that data out? But there are companies that are going to have to do that. They're going to have to sort all that data out somehow, get it structured properly so that it is ready for some sort of implementation into. And I don't care whether you're doing it in AI or whether you're just doing some sort of Power BI
Yeah,
dashboard. It doesn't,
right.
either one doesn't matter. You're going to have to get that data structured correctly to
Yeah,
get there, right? So
exactly. And that data structuring is and data quality more generally, the both of those represent consistent challenges in
right.
in an environment where a lot of the data is being reported decentrally by many people. We have more
Yes.
than 100 foremen who are putting in data about production quantities and on any given day,
Mm-hmm.
and the variability of the data coming in is requires us to make sure that it's right before we,
Yeah, it's just
you know,
something as simple as or is that square feet? Is that cubic feet?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I mean, it's like, are you measuring your rebar by the ton, or are you measuring it by,
Oh,
how are you
by
doing?
length. I mean,
Yeah.
steel by length or ton. I mean, it's funny that even comes into payment. Like sometimes we'll get invoiced on tonnage, and sometimes we'll get invoiced on length. It's
Yes.
really we definitely need to think about that,
Yeah.
and that requires us to have some intelligence built into that, and usually a human needs to help with that.
Yeah. And I know it's always shocking when you just see something like that and you go, wait a minute, that numbers can't be right. Okay. Wait a minute. That's by the ton. It's not by the, it's not by the square foot
Exactly.
or it's the
Right.
linear foot or whatever.
Linear foot of I-beam or something like that. Exactly. And we
Right.
do one of the things we do a lot of prefabrication work, and so
Hmm.
we do custom cutting of a lot of steel, and so that's where the technology is so important, but at the same time we have to make sure that the humans are in there making sure that it's the right steel, that it's the right grade, that it's the right product for the right application. Is in the
Right.
end, like prefabrication is terrific, but we've got to make sure we're getting our materials right. We've got to make sure that we've got our shop drawings right. We've got to make sure that
Hmm.
whatever's being driven into the plasma table is correct as well. So,
Sure. Yeah. And if you're building that rebar, if there's a big difference between number 4 and number 6, you just can, it's going to make a huge
or
difference.
the direction of the bend, you know, there are some
Yeah.
important things.
Yeah. There's a good idea. So thinking about the data and just kind of, wrapping these things up, um, y'all's path as you guys kind of move forward, um, seems a lot of companies they are looking at their data first. I think that's the reason why a lot of those companies we visited with, everybody's like, okay, we see it, we see the path, but
Mhm.
we do see that our data needs shaping up. What's is that a 3-year process for you guys? 1-year process, 5-year process? What does that look
I
like, do you think,
I
for the
think that's
industry?
I think it's I think it's a battle we'll be waging for decades. I just don't think I think that we've got a going forward process, and then we've got a building backwards process. I think that, because in the end, if we want to use some of these tools to be more predictive, we're going to have to get the data right from before.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky to have a lot of data, but you know, we're going to need to figure out how we map that appropriately to be able to use that the most effectively. Which is what is interesting to me to see where some of the most interesting analytics and predictive work is coming in from people who naturally accumulate data in the ecosystem. And one of those is obviously these big platforms. You see Procore, and they sort of have this advisory feature. But then also, people like the insurance companies who have a lot of data on our jobs are really looking at technology in ways to leverage that. And honestly, are helping us try to understand ways that we can use it better to reduce risk in our jobs too. So I don't know. I think that there's a lot to do with the data. It's a multi-decade process. We've been chunking data into tables since the 70s, and we're now finally coming to reckon with the fact that, you know, now that we really want to use all that, how are we gonna get back to using it? And
Right.
I'm excited. I think that some of that is highly unstructured, like notes um, on jobs that we've done years and years ago where AI actually could help and help us structure some of that data. Some of it's really going to be, just a transform process and understanding. You got to understand the data first. And I think you're
Yeah.
right.
I think, even for our group over here on the software side of the world, we are definitely going to be utilizing AI to go back through all of our old documentation. We've been around for 25 years, and there's a ton of old documentation that could be valuable,
Yep.
as far as in how did we get from, point A to point B, where did these happen? And there is no, team in the world that could go through the thousands of pages of data and code and, different things. So we're definitely going to be utilizing that type of that type of technology for sure.
Yep. I think there's some really great opportunities there.
Yeah. Well, listen, I really do appreciate it, Adam, that you've come here and just, hung out with me for here a little bit. I appreciate your time, as I know it's valuable, but I'm always looking for, folks to talk to you about how they're using technology out in the field. And, maybe next time, if we can talk, maybe sometime later in the summer, kind of
That would
see
be
what,
great.
see what kind of projects you guys got going on. We'll just stay in touch.
All right. Thanks, Robert. Really appreciate the time.